Welcome back to my channel. If you're interested in making the most durable, archival, permanent oil painting substrate or surface to paint on, then this video is for you. We're going to be talking about how to adhere an oil prime linen canvas to a panel, in this case an ACM panel, using Beva 371 heat reversible adhesive film and a plain old hand iron. This is the most reliable way I have found to adhere linen or canvas to a panel. The question may arise, why would you want to adhere linen to a panel? Now, we already talked about the durability. It's the painting best practices nerds would say that this is the most archival, they don't really use that word, but the most archival surface to paint on, substrate they call it. The reason it is so durable is that we have a rigid support. Other rigid support you may be aware of would be masonite, MDF, which is medium density fiberboard, plywood, hardwood plywood. These are all pretty good. I found the ACM is the easiest to use, and it happens to be the most rigid and isn't going to warp, and you don't need to seal it in any way. So it's just a little more convenient. It's also about the same price. If you find a supplier, which I did, I called a bunch of suppliers and I found one that could get me 4 by 8 foot sheets, you know, standard construction size sheets. It's around 50 to 60 bucks, at least in my area, and I don't live in a cheap area. In comparison, MDF, which is a smooth medium density fiberboard, is kind of like masonite, just a little bit not quite as dense. It's about the same price at like Home Depot or whatever. So really it's not as expensive as it seems. I should probably say ACM is aluminum composite material. So what that means is it is 2 very thin sheets of aluminum sandwiching a honeycomb structure of plastic in between. The honeycomb structure of plastic makes it weigh less, and it gives it the durability, and it reduces the weight and cost, basically. If you buy these sheets at an art store, like a 16 by 20 like this is, it's gonna be like 40 or 50 bucks, something crazy like that. It'll be almost the same price as entire 4 by 8 foot sheet if you find a supplier. And there's if you live anywhere near a big city, there's plastic suppliers all over. Now, if you simply can't get ACM, I would recommend getting something like MDF from the hardware store. The real downside to that, at least the practical downside, is that you do need to seal the MDF, the surface that we're gonna glue the linen to, with something like polyurethane or shellac or GAC 100 or PVA glue. You probably need like 2, if not 3 coats to kind of close the surface down and give us something hard enough for the adhesive to hold on to. So if you were to glue this directly onto like MDF or masonite, what happens is if you pull some of that adhered linen, what's gonna happen is the fibers of the MDF will come up because it's just a weak material. So you'll just be pulling like cardboard up, and it's just like flakes of cardboard. So you need to seal that down to give yourself a hard enough surface. So anyway, we'll be using ACM. I have my pre-cut sheet here. It's actually another great thing about ACM versus any of the wood options is you can cut it without a table saw or a skill saw. So it's really great for if you're living in I live in a super expensive city. So we live in a small place. We don't have a ton of room. I don't have room for a carpenter's table saw, which you really need to cut boards, because those typical table saw you buy are really made for ripping boards. They're made for cutting boards longer length. They only go to about 12 inches. So you need like a carpenter with a big table saw to cut panels, and I just don't have that. Or you need a skill saw and you need tables to cut, and it's a lot if you don't have a lot of room. So this is super convenient to be able to cut these yourself, and all you need to do is you get a ruler. Oftentimes if it's a bigger sheet, I'll get a couple of these hand clips and clip it into place so I have an extra hand so it's not wiggling, and take a knife. Usually I use a bigger utility knife, but take a knife and you're basically scoring that first layer of ACM. I found 3 tries is about what you need. Sometimes I'll do a little bit more just to be safe. And then once you have it scored, you basically just put it on the edge of something and you just push really hard, and it seems like you're gonna break something because you have to push pretty hard, but it'll snap, and then you just like kind of, you know, ring it back and forth like this until it breaks, and then you have a perfectly nice cut. And by the way, guys, be sure to like and subscribe if you are enjoying this video. And if you're enjoying this nerdy deep dive into materials and want to go even deeper, specifically into oil paint, and understand it at a super deep level so that you can manipulate it and bend it to your will, consider checking out my Learning from the Masters Rembrandt course. There's no one in history as mysterious in their use of the oil paint material as Rembrandt, which makes him a perfect vessel for understanding oil paint from top to bottom. Check it out in the description below. Now back back to the video. And, you know, aside from all the conservation and durability concerns, there's actually a much more practical concern, which is why I actually do this. Like I said, I live in a pretty small place, and if I want to paint on a fabric surface like linen, if I was to stretch on even like a 3/4 inch stretcher bar, that's taking up a ton of space in my studio, where you could probably get like 5 of these, if not more, stacked up to, and probably even like 8 stacked up to make up for just one 3/4 inch stretcher bar. So it takes up a lot of space, and also you have to be worried about the face of the stretch canvas not getting those dents that you always get, so you have to kind of protect it. It's not as convenient. So having the ability to do this is a big advantage. But I want to say up front, this is not an easy thing to do. Will take a little bit of practice. It's not super hard, but it's not super easy too. It's going to take some practice. But we'll get into all the details of it to make it as painless as possible. It's going to be worth it in the end, because to buy a panel with a good quality linen and oil prime linen, to buy it from a manufacturer that makes this at this size, 16 by 20, it's at least like 50 bucks, if not like probably more like $80 to $100 for one, which is, I can't afford that. I haven't done the math, but it's probably somewhere more close to about $10 per panel. I'm using Artfix 84C. It's ridiculously expensive. It's one of the only two canvases that I know of that has a super fine weave. I often prefer painting just on primed panel, which is a very smooth surface, no fabric attached to it, just an acrylic or oil primed that I do myself. That's the most inexpensive material for sure. So if this is sort of outside of your comfort level or outside of your financial ability, then painting on panel 100%. 99% of the paintings I've made have been on just panel. It's not an inferior surface in any way. It's one of the most durable surfaces ever. So don't feel like you're painting on something cheap if you're painting on panel. I used to think it was like a lesser than thing if it was just a smooth panel, but it's not at all. But sometimes I do like having that little bit of noise that you get from the canvas texture. It helps with softening edges. It helps with painting backgrounds with a little more atmosphere. Whereas if you're using a smooth panel, it's a little bit harder to soften edges because the paint kind of sits up on the surface. So you get harder edges everywhere with sort of the thicker impasto. So going over some of the materials, you've already seen the ACM. Here's the linen. We have this self-healing cutting board underneath. Very nice. Kind of a luxury. So here's the Beva Film. This is probably the more expensive thing in this whole process. It's probably, I got this at like $120 a roll. I think it's probably something like $150 a roll now. But you get like 20 feet. That's kind of a lot. 20 feet is a pretty good amount, you know? So it is worth it to me compared to the other option for making your own linen panels, which is using a glue, a liquid glue, typically a PVA type glue like PVA or Linico, like mounting adhesive type things. I found those were way more fussy, and the results are way less predictable. A lot more bubbles, a lot more edges coming up. Often a lot of people recommend putting weights on top as it dries, which is just a lot of extra crap you have to set up. I found this way is just a lot better. So if I couldn't use this, if I had to do the adhesive, the liquid adhesive, I wouldn't do it. I would just stretch canvas, or I would just paint on panel. So I want to make sure I'm giving you enough options. You don't have to do this, but it's really cool when it does work, and you're saving a ton of money when you can paint on this. Another thing is that I paint in layers. I tend to paint in layers more than I paint in alla prima. And alla prima, a single layer of paint, wet into wet, is going to be the most archival way to paint. And as soon as you add more layers, once that paint is dry, you add another layer on top, you're adding more complexity. So painting on a rigid support is going to minimize to a very high degree any possible problems that happen. Because when you're painting on a stretched fabric, a stretched linen or cotton, what's happening is those natural fibers at the back are being exposed to the atmosphere. And if you've ever seen a chart for relative humidity throughout the day, it starts one way and it goes up, and the next day it goes down, and it goes up, and it goes down, and it goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down. And over many, many years, the fabric is swelling and then contracting, swelling and contracting, swelling and contracting. And you can see that if you have a progressively brittle paint film on the front of that, and the substrate is slowly breathing in and out, eventually you're going to get cracks. And best case scenario, it's just a typical crack allure that can look kind of cool. But worst case scenario, you can have like delamination and the paint layer completely coming off. So I would much rather, as I paint in multiple layers, have the security of painting on a rigid support. But I'm also not against stretch. I will paint on stretch canvas. So I'm not like a dogmatic person. I stretch on, there are advantages to painting on stretch canvas. The convenience of just being able to stretch a canvas real quick when I need it for a specific size. The advantage of being able to ship it because it's going to be less heavy, especially the larger we get. So there are advantages. Like nothing is all upside. Nothing is ever all upside. There's always a downside to something. Let's cut our film down. We can just leave a little bit of extra, maybe like a centimeter or two. We don't want to be too fussy about it. So a little bit more about the Beva film. There's sort of a loose, sort of static attachment of, there's basically two primary pieces that you're gonna be aware of. There's a more opaque piece, which is kind of like a wax paper, and then there's the more translucent piece. Now I had to learn the hard way that you want to work with the translucent piece, not the opaque piece. Because I thought the opaque piece was the one holding, there's a shiny side, and I thought this was the one holding the adhesive the first time I got this. And I put a lot of heat on it and it was not coming off, and I just couldn't understand what was happening. It's because I had the totally wrong piece. So you want the translucent piece. And there's two sides to it. The glue containing side is going to be a little more matte, and the removable mylar is going to be a little more shiny. It takes a little bit of looking at it. You want to see a little bit of texture on the glue side. But yeah, you want shiny side up when we're applying it. So okay, we want to set the wax paper, the opaque paper aside. We're going to need that in a little bit. Okay, we have our ACM panel. They have a protective sort of covering that we want to remove. And you'll often find when you've cut your ACM panel, especially when you're doing it with a razor, you'll have some raised lips at the end, like kind of like sharp raised lips there. What I like to do when those occur is take the shaft of a screwdriver and run it along until I've smoothed that down. It's just going to help us adhere to the edges a little bit better, because those are the areas that are going to have a problem more than anything, and we want to minimize possibility for problems there. Alright, so our first step is going to be to adhere the Beva film to the panel. Now what I have here is it's kind of an industrial sort of clothes iron. I'll try to put a link to it in the description. The plus side of it is it does have a flat face. I don't know how big of a difference that makes versus the sort of consumer grade ones that have a lot of undulation for like the steam and all that stuff. But even more importantly is it doesn't have an auto turn off, which is annoying when you're doing a lot of these, but you should be doing a lot of them in a batch and not just one off, because there's a lot of setup for just like a one off panel, trust me. So I've set in case you have the exact same one, or you end up getting the exact same one, I put a Sharpie mark in the exact spot that I found works the best. Now, this is where this gets confusing. If you've been trying to do this yourself and you've searched and this video has come up, this is probably where you're running into issues. The Beva film activates at about 150 degrees Fahrenheit. I originally tried to do it at a much lower temperature, but since we're using a handheld iron and not an offset press that distributes all the temperature all at once uniformly, we need a much higher temperature because we're moving, and that movement is adjusting the temperature that we're applying. The faster we move, the lower the temperature. The slower we move, the higher the temperature. So we want a higher temperature so that we can move kind of quickly and distribute that heat all over. This is where you're gonna ruin some material. So either you're not going hot enough and the adhesive isn't activating, or you're going too hot, and the way you know you're going too hot is the ACM panel will actually start to melt. The plastic in between the two aluminum sheets will start to melt and it'll start to warp. That's how you know you've gone too far or you're going too slow. So let's apply our adhesive here. You'll know you're doing it right. It'll instantly start to wrinkle up. You really want to give a lot of attention to the edges and the corners. These are the spots that are always the tricky spots, no matter how you're adhering linen. If you're doing it with a liquid, a PVA glue, same thing. These are always the tricky areas. But you'll start to see the glue adhering. You'll start to see it get a little bit less wrinkly, and it means like the glue is adhering. You see I'm moving at a pretty at a very specific speed. This is the thing that's just going to take a little bit of practice. The right amount of speed is where the action is. Like I said, too fast, not enough temperature. Too slow, too much temperature, too much heat. It's just like painting. There's going to be trial and error. We're gonna ruin things. We're gonna mess things up. That's baked into the process. Just accept it beforehand, and everything will be okay. And I have to kind of like, it's like this is how I need to talk to myself sometimes. I almost have to like bully myself a little bit, because I expect everything to go perfectly the first time I do something, which is an unreasonable thing. It doesn't make any sense. All right, this is looking pretty good. And it just really does appear like it's starting to adhere, especially at the corners, which are so important. These edges, these corners, we really want these to, when we're peeling up the backing, we want the adhesive to remain on the panel. And the spots where it's most likely to come up is on the edges. So we let that cool for a second there, because letting it cool is going to let the adhesive firm up a little bit. Because I'm kind of too impatient to wait very long. But it's gonna, if you're having problems, you should probably wait until it's cooled. But you want to pull it off so that the adhesive remains. It's pretty thin. It's gonna be kind of hard to tell that you've applied it, but it's gonna be like a wrinkly, kind of alligator-y skin sort of look to it. And if you see that alligator skin all over, that's a good sign. Sometimes the edges come up like this, like the overlap. I kind of prefer to not pull them off at this point, but it just kind of came up, so I just pulled it. So this is looking good. We have our film attached to the panel. It's going to be ready for our linen once our linen is ready. Now our linen, you can also use cotton. It's not if there's a cotton canvas that you like to use, 100% use it. I just like a very like fine texture, and unfortunately very fine texture is also very expensive. An alternative to the, I don't know if I told you what this was earlier, but this Artfix 84C, I believe it's C. It's ridiculously expensive. It's like $900. It's like about $1,000 total for the roll. As a professional, I don't mind paying those prices, but you know, especially if you're just learning in your first 5 years or so of learning, you really don't need to spend that money. There is the Centurion OP Deluxe linen rolls, which are about 1/3 of the price of this, which are it's only slightly more texture than this, and totally worth it. But sometimes I just like fancy stuff. I don't know what's wrong with me. There's just something so nice about this, like super fine linens. I like that little bit of texture without and a very oppressive canvasy, linen-y texture. And what I'm doing here with the scissors is there's a few kind of nubs or threads that are sticking up. I don't get too fussy about this. It's not the end of the world. You're gonna have these thick threads here and there. That's just part of the charm of linen. It will stand up a little bit on the face if there's like a little nub. But I've bought these panels from the high-end suppliers that supply panels with this kind of linen on it, and they have those same things. So it made me feel better I was being a little bit overly perfectionist when I'd see like a little bit of the side raised up or a little bump on the surface. It's not the end of the world. You know, once you paint on it, no one's ever gonna notice it. All right, so we're gonna place our linen down, you know, backside onto it, kind of obviously. I don't know if I need to say that or not, but better to over-explain than under-explain. Except to the people that complain that I ramble too much. It's the best. This is the best I can do, guys. Now here's where our leftover wax paper is going to come in handy dandy. I put the shiny side down. The two reasons for this: it helps the iron glide really smoothly, and it also, if we just put the iron straight onto the canvas, it tends to put like marks on it. It's not the end of the world, but my main thing is the glideability. It glides really smooth, which I like. And we're gonna go same temperature. Now we have two pieces of material that we're going through, so we're gonna slow down just a little bit. And I'm trying to, my first pass here is going to be kind of reactivating everybody to a semi-tacky state. We're not fully activating the glue. We're just sort of priming it to a degree so that we're starting to get that glue to stick. You know, fun fact about this Beva film is actually not even meant for this. It's meant for adhering. It's basically relining linen to linen, or canvas to canvas, or hemp to hemp. But it just so happens it does work pretty well for doing this. Now, if you have the room, a heat press is going to be probably easier. I've never used it, but I imagine it's probably going to be easier. When I first started looking into this stuff was a long time ago, and an offset heat press was like at least $800. But I think since the pandemic or something, a lot of people are doing side hustles. There's a lot more heat presses available, and they're a lot closer to like $200 now on Amazon. So if you're going to do this quite a bit and you have the room, that's probably going to be the way to go. I remember like you would be stoked to find like a heat press for like $500 used, you know, but there's now just a ton of them on Amazon. I don't know if they're quality, but because I haven't used them and I just really don't have the space for it. But you see I'm using a pretty consistent overall cadence here. And this is just going to be one of those things that you're going to have to kind of figure out what's going to work for your specific situation. Like there's a lot of factors that are going to play into this. The temperature of your studio is probably going to play a role. If you live in a very cold area, you're going to need more heat. If you live in a hot area, you're going to need less heat. The iron you're using, a lot of the consumer grade irons have a lot of fun names for the temperature, like linen or polyester or cotton. So you're probably going to want to be up high, like towards linen or cotton if you have one of those. And again, we're modulating the temperature by speed. But we want that much higher than we think kind of temperature. So I've done a pretty good pass here. I'm kind of talking a lot, so I'm doing more than I typically would because I kind of forgot what I was doing. And actually, I already did one of these, I already did this whole thing once already, and I hadn't plugged in my mic. Oh, curses filled the air. Man, it's looking pretty good. You know, if you're pulling it up and it's just coming right up, the temperature isn't high enough. You need to slow down or turn up the temperature a little bit. If it's coming up just a little bit, it means we're probably pretty close. We just need to apply a little bit slower cadence, and that's going to give us that high heat and give us that nice sweet adhesion. It's such an unusual smell. The smell of linen, especially as you heat it up. I love the smell, really. This should be good. It's looking good. I'm not seeing anything right now. Any bubbles or... Wow, that looks pretty good. Once again, I'm kind of relieved that it actually worked out. You know, like I think I said earlier, it's been many different attempts over the years to try to get this to work. And then I would give up and go on to something else. I wouldn't get it to work. And then I'd pick it back up again because I'd have the need for it. Get a little bit closer that time, but fail and move on. And it was a number of different attempts over many years to where I finally kind of dialed in. And it was all about the cadence and higher heat than I thought. We're gonna let this cool a little bit. It's gonna help as it cools. The adhesion really takes place and sets up. And then we're gonna cut off the edges, and that we should be ready to roll. All right, we've allowed this to cool down a little bit, flipped it over, and we're gonna trim off the excess. Now I have a little X-Acto knife here. You want this to be super duper 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 sharp. The way you maintain sharpness with these little blades is you can break them off. You take a wrench, snap it off, take that little extra piece of razor, take some tape, put tape around it so that you don't cut yourself, put it in the trash. We have a lot of transients here and they may go through the trash. I prefer them to not get cut on my waist. And you have a super sharp blade here, and this is the easiest part of the whole thing. You're just gonna take it and run it right down your fabric here. Slight lean in towards the panel. If you're right-handed, it's easier to cut on the right. Probably the opposite is probably true as well. We're probably gonna need to do a little bit of touch-up, as typically does happen, with the iron, so make sure to hold on to those wax paper pieces so that we can reapply some heat where needed, where a side is coming up or if there's a bubble or anything like that. So taking a look, looking pretty good. You can run your hand across the edges here, see who wants to come up. This guy wants to come up a little bit here. You're looking at it at a very steep angle to the light, and that can help you see if there's any funkiness, but luckily no bubbles or anything in the middle, so that's good. Just a little bit of edge coming up here. That was probably the far edge, the edge that was out here where I just didn't give it as much love. If you have one of these that doesn't have the auto turn off, there's a reason for the auto turn off. You want to be careful because it will start a fire if it falls down. As far as I know, I don't know if it turns off, if it starts to touch something, I don't know, but be careful with that thing. All right, wax paper. I'm just gonna run my heat over it. Radiating it out a little bit. Radiating the movement out a little bit. So more pressure towards the center and then a lot less pressure out, just so I get a little bit of a feathering. Like I don't want it just to be right here because it's gonna just activate the glue right there. So I want a little bit of progressive activation outward, but really applying that concentration of slower speed and a little more pressure towards the edge here. You may find that once it dries or once it cools down, the temperature changes. You might get a little a risen spot here and there. You can just fix it with the iron. But don't, like, I used to be real particular about this, overly perfectionist about this. Like if there's just a little bit raising up, it's not the end of the world. This is ACM panel. You have to put it in a frame. Like the edges are too ugly to not put it in a frame. And MDF's going to be like that too. I mean, you could, I guess, do like a floating frame or something like that. But you know, this is going to be pushed into a frame. The rabbit of the frame will be covering quite a bit of it. So if a little bit is sticking up here or there in a small way, it's really not going to be a problem. And while waiting for this to cool, I actually did the math. Looking at like sort of there's these cool boutique suppliers. I won't say their names, but they make great product. To get a 16 by 20 inch panel like this with this particular linen on it is over $100 just for one. That's a lot of money. And I did the math. It was about $25 doing it this way. So a quarter of the cost to get a super high quality, beautiful surface to paint on, I think is worth it. If you were to be using the Centurion linen, it would be more around like $12 to $15 total. So much more affordable. If you're factoring in, if you are sort of stretching linen, you have to factor in the stretcher bars, and that's going to be at least $15 right there. So, you're already at a very reasonable price for super high quality, super rigid, super permanent substrate that you can trust will last through an apocalypse. So I hope this was helpful. I know there's a lot here. If you have questions, I'll try to answer any of them. If you're running into issues or whatever, let me know and I'll try to help as best I can. Other than that, thanks for watching.